I've known you for a while. We met, I think, when I was probably like 14 or 13, and you were like 16, I think.
Yeah, you're
Like
like, I don't know. What's our age difference? I'm
3
38.
years. Yeah,
What's,
it's 3 years.
yeah.
Yeah, so I was like a teenager. I was definitely like in seventh or eighth grade, but I remember you were the first like out kid I knew, like ever. And that was like going back, yeah, to like 2000 easily. But when did you like get into like drugs and alcohol? Like really? Because you drank in high school that I can remember, but like,
Yeah. So that's the funny thing too with it is that I just drank like the first time I ever drank that wasn't my parents giving me wine or my dad giving me a beer was actually with a group of friends that you would know as well. And we had gone to a party and a friend of mine and we split a fifth of Jack and I drank a little bit of it and I was like, this tastes fucking terrible. And so I drank some more and I drank the entire fucking bottle. And to this day, I've never been as sick as I was then. Even somebody when they bring up Jack Daniels to this day, it just rubs me the wrong way. And I was just I loved it, but I was so incredibly sick from it. And that was my first real experience with being intoxicated. Um,
yeah.
so when I got into it, when it really became a problem, or when I got into it. What's your question?
Well, that night you got really sick. How long did it take you before you drank again?
Or I drank again. Well, it depended on when all of the cool people were going to drink again. So that's a yeah. So I would say probably about 2 weeks at the most.
Yeah. So it wasn't going to stop you from drinking that night. It's not like
No,
you like had a bad experience. You're like, I won't touch it again for like ever, and then like 2 years later you started drinking again. It was you drank when
oh,
you could again.
yeah, because it wasn't a problem. I just assumed this is what everyone does. Doesn't everyone just get so blackout drunk that they throw up for 3 days? Um,
The answer is no. The answer
who
is no.
knew? Who knew? But at
I
16, though,
I thought so too. I
right?
guess I had role models like you.
Just put it back on me. Push it back
Yeah.
on me.
So at 16 now, you're starting to like drink, but like only parties when like you said, like you're invited, like the cool kids invited you, and you're gonna go to the party and get drunk. And were you always just like going to get blackout drunk at every party?
It has never once been my intention to get blackout drunk. If anything, it has always been the opposite. It has always been I'm just gonna drink like regular people. But for me personally, we all have our reasons of why we do what we do. Um, but the majority of mine was just always, and I say this all the time. Anytime that I'm lucky enough to be asked to speak somewhere, I always started with, I have never been comfortable in any room, including this room. Even sitting here talking to you, I'm not comfortable. I'm not one that's normally comfortable. And so I quickly found out, obviously, after a few drinks, you're comfortable with anything. And so that's what kind of kicked that off until I found out that there were things that worked even better than that. So yeah,
Yeah, and we'll get there because yeah, I do remember like slightly remember now that we're like thinking about it, like I knew you had a problem with pills. Like we both had the same problem at the same time almost.
right.
And we didn't even really get high together. It's not even like that. It's almost like I just knew that it was happening, just like you probably knew why it was happening. But I vaguely remember like when you would get drunk back like because I would get drunk. Like anybody that was with both of us at the same time while we were drinking had to deal with both of us drunk.
You're not wrong.
Because we never got high together with pills that I can recall, but we definitely got drunk as shit together a bunch of times.
We did.
Which I can't even recall because of again I would get blacked out and
it's flashes. Like I see us at a fire somewhere. You just see like little snippets here and there.
There's a garage here, there's a backyard here, there's a basement there. It's like it's typical Jersey drinking high school kind of shit. Like
Good way to put it.
yeah. Because that's and now that you think back to your drinking days, it was in someone's basement, it was in someone's garage, some random backyard that had a pool in it that nobody ever really went into unless you got thrown in. Like that was like the Jersey, and then the random woods parties, which never ended well, especially for me. Which, were you there that night?
No, I think I've only been to one. I wasn't on your level.
Did my cousin bring you that night when I got alcohol poisoning? I could have swore she wasn't alone.
You're absolutely right. I was there. Yeah, you're right. See how much damage drinking does? Yeah, I was there. I do remember that. Actually, it's coming back to me now.
You would have been 19 at the time because I was 16. It was the night before Easter, and I drank a bottle of Bacardi in 10 minutes. And they carried me out on a board, and then this is all what they told me because I don't remember. But they carried me out on like a piece of plywood, and then like they heard sirens, and then they dropped me. And I think that's where you guys arrived, like at the same time as the cops.
Mm-hmm. So that's wild to me. That whole piece is just somewhere else. Yeah, but that's another good point too. You know, these cool people that we wait to invite us to parties will just drop us on plywood if there's sirens.
And it was an ambulance. The ambulance they called. The cops were there, but eventually it was the ambulance. I heard they called the fucking ambulance. Why'd you get scared? You called them.
They want to get in trouble.
So when were you introduced to actual drugs now? Because did you start with right into pills or did you start with Coke first?
I
could have swore you did Coke.
It's tricky because I did, but no more than what is deemed normal by society. You know, at a bar or at a club. You know, a bump here, a bump there. But I did. I started with that. I really, really liked Coke. I was really big on Coke and drinking. Obviously, they tend to go hand in hand. And that was the first thing that I ever went to rehab for. The first thing that I went to rehab for wasn't an opiate. It was for alcohol and Coke.
That's what I thought. Okay, now, because when was that? Because I think I was on pills by the time that happened. Was that late 2000s?
That was 2008.
And what part of 2008?
What's that?
What time in 2008 was it? I'm just trying to like...
It was during the week that Mariah released Touch My Body as a single because... and here's why I know that. The reason I know that is because...
It only took you 13 minutes in to reference Mariah Carey, so I'm really impressed. I actually lost money.
Listen.
I thought it'd be 5 minutes.
First 5, right. I figured I would have been able to. But I just remember people coming to get me and they're like, oh, your girl's on the radio. And the song premiered while I was detoxing from alcohol and Coke at the time. So that would have been, and because I know her discography like the back of my hand, that should have been around like March, April of 2008.
So, okay, 6 months later, I found myself getting into pills. It was October 2008. Yep.
I don't think I realized it was that early for you.
Oh, yeah. It was actually earlier than that. The first time I had a bender was in, like, July of 2008. And it was to the point where it was such a binge for, like, a week straight that I went to work and I got sent home because I had the flu. You know, cut to 6 months later after 2 months of straight using, you know, when I got heavy into it in October, because I didn't do it again. It's not because I thought it was correlated. It was just I got back from, like, vacation, and I was just relaxing. I was, I drank, dude. You know, I smoked weed. I drank. So, and then for all September of 2008, I was doing hallucinogenics. Either I was on acid or I was trying shrooms. You know what I mean? Like, I was trying all that stuff. And then because alcohol was getting boring to me, it wasn't working. And then that's when I, found pills because alcohol stopped working. And I found pills. And they were cheap and it was easy and whatever. And, but yeah, so when I was on a 2-month binge then, after I got back into pills in October, I started withdrawing for the first time. And that's when someone said, oh, no, if you just get high, it'll fix it. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And not like, oh, my God, this is a concern. It was, oh, thank God I got the solution.
Yeah. More drugs, yeah.
More drugs. Obviously, I'm an adult. I know the answer to this. I did math.
Yeah.
So, I was just like, but that was, then I had that realization, though, that like, oh, shit, I didn't have the flu back in July. I was fucking withdrawing. Like,
Yeah.
Son of a bitch. So, okay, you go to rehab for the first time now, and it's April 2008.
April 2008, and I am what, 24ish, I guess. And that is when I realized, like, I'm not an addict and I'm not an alcoholic. Like, look at this guy, look at this woman over here. Like, they've lost their families. This one's homeless. This one, as soon as they leave here, they're going to jail. And so, to me, I was like, well, I like to do a little bit of blow. I like to go out to clubs. I could drink like everybody does this. It's not that big of a deal. And so I didn't get it at all. I was just like, all right, like as soon as I leave here, that's obviously what I'm going to do. And that's what I did.
See, that's why I assumed that. That's why I assumed that maybe you went to rehab after I started getting high, because I could have swore I saw you get high, like as I was high, because or I got drunk.
What's funny is, what's funny is, I specifically remember one incident where I was so sick, and I had actually reached out to you, and I was meeting up with you to buy a pill from you in some store, and that's a flash in my memory that I think about every now and then.
Was that like like early on, like when you got back?
No,
this was the year.
Yeah.
I do remember that. I do remember meeting you at least a couple different times, because you would randomly, it would be so random, and it would be like, Vince, I'm like, no, he's looking for.
Because then it also felt like shitting where you eat, and you don't want to.
Yeah, no, yeah, you don't want to have to like ask somebody that you're like friends with. Like,
right.
You'd rather ask somebody that's like, yeah, exactly. But you only go to them when you like have to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like I don't want him to know I need these every day.
I don't want him to think I'm some kind of junkie or something.
Yeah, I just need him to think I'm like, I need this just once, and I haven't done them in forever. That's what I'm telling.
Yeah, and I'm gonna stop again right after this.
Yeah, this is my last, first and only. It's just been a long day. You know.
Yeah. I got back pain, and my doctor cut me off. All this.
So you get back, and you're like, oh, I'm fine. I'm not like them, so I can go back to drinking and blowing coke.
Yeah, so I got right back to it. While I had been in that rehab, my roommate that I had met there, Jimmy, God rest his soul, because I'm sure he is not alive. He was there for heroin, and he was young, like young, and I remember just thinking like no, you need help, and here I am, who can't even realize like you're on your way, and I'm giving him advice, right? And so we had swapped numbers, and he called me when he got out, because I had gotten out first, and we decided to meet up in right outside of Newark, in Jersey, which is not somewhere you want to be. And we were going to get a hotel room, and we were just going to party all day. We were going to stop, and he was going to pick up dope, and I was going to pick up coke, and we were just going to like hang out overnight. And so we went, all this happened, and we're in the room, and it's now like 4 a.m., and I'm obviously like out of my skull. My eyes are fucking bigger than the moon, and I can't sleep. And he's obviously having no problem with that. And he was like, here, just do a little bit of this. And he's like, you'll be fine. And in my head, heroin was always had that, this stigma to it. And you're like, I would never, I lost family members to it, friends to it. And I'm like, oh, I would never. And in that moment, I was just like, oh, I'm sure it's fine. So he had cut me a line of it to snort. And I just remember, like, as I went down to do it, I remember looking over, and there was the wastebasket in the hotel room. And it was just covered with, like, globs and globs of toilet paper, just saturated in blood from him just shooting over and over and over. And I was just like, wow, like, what the fuck am I doing? But then I did it, and I was like, oh, wow, like, what is this, right? And I was just like, holy shit. And I just remember, like, just everything was warm and everything was great. And I was like, wow, I was like, well, I'll never do that again, because, I could definitely see myself getting hooked on that. And I left. So that was my first.
But how you just like you snorted it and left, or like you came down and then left? I hope.
Oh no, came down and then later checked out. That was that. I never saw Jimmy again. Just FYI, I have no idea. My phone number used to change at least once a week. You'll probably remember that, because each week I was gonna start over again. So that was that, and I went back to just my normal life. I still would hit up my one Coke Connect every now and then, but it was nothing. It was nothing more than that. It was kind of like a weekend, or every other weekend I would just get some Coke, but I would always just drink excessively. At that time, I don't think I was yet sleeping with a bottle of vodka.
Yeah.
Not yet. Not
You
yet.
got there?
Oh yeah. So by the following year, I would wake up in the middle of the night, and instead of like a normal human being, like reaching over and getting a bottle of water off the table next to the bed, I would just get my bottle of vodka that was already in bed with me, and I would just guzzle something and go back to sleep. So that's where I was at in 2009. If you want me to like chronologically go until you interrupt, I can do that.
You keep going. Yeah, because I'm
Okay.
curious. Like, yeah.
Okay. So that was 2009. As
You're
it
living
went
at
on,
home?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I'm still with my parents. I lived with my parents for a very, very long time because of this. So at that time, I had been dating someone, and he had told me like, oh, I'm worried about my roommate. Her boyfriend sells 30s, and he gives her them, and I think she has a problem with them. He's like, I take them every now and then, but I could take like a half, and then I don't even think about it for a month. And I was like, yeah, like that makes sense to me. Like, fuck do I know? And so then the boyfriend comes over, and we're all hanging out, and I was like, oh yeah, like why not? So then we had split one, and then that was it. That is what formally, I would say, set me off. And it was the very next day, I was like, hey, like, is he coming over again? And he and I did not work out, so his loss clearly. But
So
that
did you end into sniffing them right away then? Because
no.
remember, okay, so 30s were my thing. So like I do have questions when it comes to these now that we're on this topic. Because I remember the first time I did, like I was like, I want this every day. You know what I mean? Like this is what I want, and I'm okay with it. Like so like you ate it the first time or did you sniff it?
I ate it.
Okay, just ate a half of 30 and you were off to the moon.
I was on the moon. It was great. Was up most of the night, and I'm like, the next day I wanted it again. Still thought like, how much of a problem could that be? It's like $10 for half a pill. Like this will never be a problem.
New question.
Yeah.
Now, how long had it been since you tried the heroin the first time?
It had probably been about 6 or 8 months.
Okay.
That time.
Okay, and you were all coked up, so you just got even with heroin the first time. So it's not like you caught a feeling of opiates the first time. You were just coming back down with it. So that's
right.
That's why you didn't like. If you would have just did a line of heroin, I'm sure you never would have did a 30, because you would have wanted that heroin feeling the next day. But luckily for you, you were so coked out that heroin feeling brought you back to just like normal-ish, where you could feel the body high, but brought you just down to here and not all the way down. Or else you would have chased that all the way down like you did from the Roxy, because that all the way down feeling is significant when it's alone the first time and not aided by other things.
Hugely different. It's not, nowhere near on the same level. But yeah, that. I ate the half there, so it wasn't even like it was a full, exactly. So from there, I lost my connection to that guy anyhow.
What's funny actually is like the 15, I could like the first time I got like extremely high that like to set me off was only 2 10s. I did 2 perk 10s, and I was just like I got higher than I ever did. And then when I was after a few different days in a row that I was seeing my guy, I used to meet him at Giuseppe's when that still existed, and he actually passed away a few years ago from like cirrhosis, I think. But he was like a regular around town. But I saw him, and he was like, like you're buying all these 10s, you can just buy a 30 for $20 and like save your money because the 10s are 10. I'm like, oh shit, okay. And he's like, plus you can snort them. I'm like, oh, okay. Then I was really off. Then once I was able to find them, like I only did 10s when I couldn't find 30s. Like I was off. Like, so how long did it take before you ate one before you snorted one?
So
because
later,
that's a different thing.
Yeah, well, just a few months after that, I had met a new friend, and his best friend was a big time dealer, like massive amounts of weight moving back and forth, and so just at any given moment, I mean, there's hundreds of 30s available. And it's like, oh yeah, like here's just like a handful.
Okay, so when's the first time you got into like sniffing pills now? Like how you said you met that dude?
Yeah, so it was my ex best friend. So it was just a matter of months, a few months after that. I had gotten more through this, and that was the first time that I even knew you could sniff the pill. Like I had no idea. And so they were doing it, and I was like, oh, like, I guess this is like what we're doing. And so we did, and that was a completely different experience because that was not only sniffing it, that was a whole 30. That was the first time that I had ever done that, and it was I was I thought I was going to throw up. But after that, I fell in love with that. I fell in love with that feeling.
Yeah.
You know, everything was good.
Yeah, because when people are trying to escape things or trying to hide things or trying to like feel accepted, when you feel that like blanket, you're like, oh, I can settle into this nice and good for a while.
It's exactly what it is. It's like I mean, even during that time, if I had that in me, I mean, so many things that I look back now. One of the biggest things that probably is the reason why I had 6 years last month is Facebook memories that come up, and you see these things that you said, and I don't know about you, but I liked to get like as looped up as I could, and I would get on some soapbox about some hot topic, and I felt like everyone needed to read 6 paragraphs of my opinion on this topic. That's just like expletive laced, just this rambling tangent. And I look back now and I'm like, Jesus Christ, why does anybody even still talk to me? Like it's literally the ramblings of a madman. Those things that pops up and I'm like, Jesus Christ. But as you said, like that, it's that security blanket. And so, I had started arguments with family members and family members that are, in my even monthly or yearly life. But I felt like, you know what, I better step in here and I better let them know that she's a bitch for this. And to this day, don't talk to some of these people. But because, when you have that, it's kind of like the same security of, cyberbullying, you're behind the keyboard. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what it did for me. And as you said, when you struggle with feeling accepted, that you don't need anyone's acceptance. You don't care at that point. You have what you need.
Yep.
And
I always, yeah, it is like a really, it's the most toxic relationship you could ever be in. You know, it is like where everybody's telling you to stop, and you're just like, you don't understand. Like you don't get it. We have something special. Like it really is the most toxic relationship that I've ever been in. Which is saying a lot. So I mean, did you ever date anybody that you were using with? Like, were you guys like I had this, what do you call it, junkie love? Where you're like you're both just getting high together and that's what you're doing.
yeah, so I didn't, with respect to that, with the person I'm talking about now that obviously I've been spoken to in 6 years. It was essentially that, and it kind of was, obviously you're just feeding each other's habits. That's the basis of what that friendship or relationship in general is. And had that and couldn't understand or imagine that person not in my life. And that was the whole foundation of it, which is, something that I hope we would touch on today, just because I think that that's something that I didn't, that I had never given much thought to, of the actual act of cutting someone out of your life for that. And I think that was the biggest and hardest thing that I struggled with, that I still struggle with, like, to this day. To this day, it's something that, I haven't made peace with, and something that maybe one day I will. But the entire relationship that, it was family, it was every single day, like basically lived together. And that was the basis of it. And so once, I had made the decision to, follow through and finally get clean, that had to go as well. And so what's funny is, we moved where we are now, a year ago. And it just so happens to be 2 blocks away from, he doesn't live here anymore. But it's one of those things that even like driving home, like it will trigger those same things. And I remember this used to be my ride. I go pick up, come back this way. And it's funny that 6 years later, it's still like, it's that muscle memory. I almost want to make that same turn. It's the same thing, but it's so entrenched with that toxic relationship, and that.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's one of those things where you kind of don't. You at that time, that's the only person you can see yourself being with because the only person that really understands what you're going through, and you know what I mean. The only person you can be completely honest with.
But how long did it take you to realize that? Because we were joking about that earlier. When you're in that toxic relationship with the drug, and people are telling you to stop, and you're like, "But why? We have something special." How long did it take you to realize that you didn't have something special and that you were just an addict? Because I feel like I figured that out pretty early on, but just couldn't do it.
I literally, you'll see in a couple of days when my story comes out on my birthday, that I knew that I was an addict within a month. So, like, somebody had their like teeth taken out. So we were hanging out. He had like perk fives, right? Just straight up Percocet 5 milligrams. And I had done like 430s before I walked in there. Like, just like slammed 430s, sniffed them, and then went up to hang out with him. And we were like, put on a movie or put on a video game. And he took one perk five and he was out cold within an hour. And I would just like, yeah, exactly. I was like, well, that's telling me something.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what are we gonna do here? Because like, I was just so high, like had a conversation with myself. Like I do that a lot, and I'm like, what are we like? And I was like, this is like, I love this feeling, and I've never had this feeling from alcohol, from weed, nothing ever touched this feeling, and I feel better than I've ever felt before. So I'll just obviously I'm still working, I'm still functioning, everything's still good. I'm not in jail. Fuck it, it's fun. Let's do it. Just don't do heroin. My rule was just don't do heroin. And that was I was lucky enough that I had that conversation so early on. And I think that's also why it lasted for as long as it did because I thought I was in control from the get-go. But and I asked that, it's funny because I usually ask that question to everybody and you cut me off to it this time, which is, when did you know you were an addict? Because most people answer, like 30 days into AA I finally said I was an alcoholic, like stuff like that. Like they were just in total denial of their entire addiction and everything. So like, when did you know you were addicted?
So those are two different questions that you asked me. So the first one was, when did you know you were an addict? And the other was, when did I know I was addicted? To, in the interest of here, yeah. I knew I was an addict in general when I was a kid, and it had nothing to do with alcohol or drugs. I have always known that I was an addict. My family's always been open with me about family members who struggled with drug addiction, and so I was well aware of what addiction was and how it could present itself in different ways. It's not just alcohol or drugs. So I knew as a kid that I was an addict. When I knew I was addicted to pills was still in that same month, and it was in August of 2009. I knew then.
Okay. So, like, and were you okay with it? That you were like, well, I need these every day, and that's okay?
I wasn't okay with it, and I wasn't okay with knowing exactly what was going to happen. I didn't have the benefit of pretending to be ignorant or to not know. I knew exactly what was going to happen, but I would weigh it in my head, and by then, obviously, your thinking's already fucked. So I'm thinking that, okay, like I get it, like this is probably going to ruin my life, but also look at everything I'm able to do, and look how I'm okay with myself. I can walk into a Wawa without freaking out that 15 people see me walk in there, like, look at this faggot. And that was mainly like what it was, and it was when I realized if that high was coming down, those same feelings about walking into a store, walking past people, whatever it might be, would come back, and that's when I realized, oh, you're an addict.
Okay, so I can't breeze right by that one. So is that something that was always on your mind, that you were self-conscious, like that you were being judged like for your sexual orientation?
Since I was a kid, yeah. I mean, but for that, I probably wouldn't have, obviously I would have been an addict either way, but I wouldn't have sought out these other substances. I think, I just remember being a kid, and I used to, it's not going to be a surprise to you, JD, but, I used to I would wear like a blanket over me, and I don't know if you're familiar, but the bodyguard, Whitney Houston, and she would do that Queen of the Night performance, and she would like, first off, the title of the song alone, Queen of the Night, right? And I used to like rip it off, and I would do like the choreography in the living room as a kid, and I, so I
So that's what I mean. That's why I'm kind of surprised.
So no, so I did. The reason why I'm laughing is that I didn't realize I was different, and I didn't realize that that wasn't normal until it was told to me. And so I think that was when I started to have the realization and be aware of how am I presenting, really. Like how is my walk? Like my arms, are they going too much? Like are my hips swiveling when I'm walking? Are they, are my S's, too pronounced? Those are things that thoughts that I started having really early on as a kid. I mean, I went to Catholic school in South Philly, so you can imagine. So it's not like there was much acceptance preached there. And then, I moved over into the suburbs from there at that transitional like seventh grade piece. And at that moment, for my first day of school, I remember being excited for my first day of school at a new school in a new place. And as soon as I got there, everybody hated me, and that kicked that off. And then so within the week, it had become about the gay thing, which obviously I always make that joke that they knew I was gay before I did. Like I had no idea, and I was like, "Am I? What's that?" And I'm like, "Oh wait, maybe I am." Like I do linger in the underwear aisle looking at the things, maybe. But that was when that became a thing, and then it didn't stop. So even if it had stopped, that was already burned into my head. Like all through school, I didn't come out until I was 17, which I know is young. It's not young today.
But it's not young today. I mean, yeah, we were. Yeah, it's definitely not young today. We had one of the best. We have the LGBTQ meetings here on Thursdays. You know that?
I saw it on your thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of our board members, they just had their name, changed over recently, and they run the meeting with me and my wife, and usually I don't run that meeting at all. I just sit there and I chime in here and there. But the youth, we have invited the youth in too, because the issue of LGBTQ in the youth right now. So it has always been like here and there, like one will show up this week and another will show up this week. And this past week, there was like 6 of them that came in, but they staggered in at different times. And some of them, they're all 12. Transitioned out, everything. The one girl had her dad with her. Like, and then, yeah, they were so excited to see each other and see that they had other friends in town and shit. Like, we were all, like, all the adults were, like, crying. We were all just, like, handing the tissues around because, like, we sent them in the other room to have a meeting off by themselves for, like, their own youth meeting. And we all just bawling. So, because, like, obviously, like, you couldn't be, that accepted at 12,
No, and see, I think kids today are at an advantage and also at a disadvantage. When I was realizing all of this was, at a time when Will and Grace had just come out, and, that was something brand new, and they would actually debate and mention on the news, that they're trying to get it pulled because they shouldn't be showing this on TV. What about the children? And all that. And so you just internalize all that. You're like, oh my God, I'm a fucking freak. Like, yeah, you're right. Like, you better pull that off. Like, I must be awful. And so, like, you cover that up. But today's kids, I think, there's so much more awareness. Kids are coming out in first grade and saying, I'm not a boy, I feel like a female, or whatever it is. So they have that, but I also think that we're in a time now where there's almost less tolerance than there was a few years back. And I think that they feel that and they do get that. I see that a lot, in my job. I see that the older viewpoint is it's becoming an even bigger thing than it was 5 years ago. And these kinds of views where they're really, they're hammering down on this of, no, if you're born this is what you are. And no, a man should be with a woman. And you're shocked that in 2021 that this is really the messaging that we give these kids. And so it should come as no surprise that these kids develop substance abuse issues. And look at the numbers. I had to present something on this before, and I was shocked because I didn't know. I researched it, but
75%, I think.
And the suicide rates, and I was just, this is a problem. But I think they go hand in hand, and I think you're right about the accessibility. Really, kudos to you for making that even a thing to have an LGBTQ group, because that's something even in this area it's hard to find. There's one that meets on Sundays, and there's one in like PA. I think there might be two here now.
We might be the one in PA you're thinking of.
You're probably the one in PA. Exactly. Now I gotta go to the Pocono. But so really, that's awesome to hear. But I think that's a big part of it, and I think that finally people are starting to address it. People like you guys that these kids need that outlet. So yeah, so when I got out of rehab the last time, I probably also important to mention that I was in and out of 13 different rehabs from 2008 until 2015.
So you kept having to, did your mom kept saying you had to go, or your dad, or that you kept saying you had to go?
So every single time until the last time, it was, and it wasn't ever you have to go. It's like you need help. By the end, it wasn't a secret. I mean, it was I had ruined all of their lives. I don't know how my parents had even stayed together. I mean, I was lucky enough that my family was well off enough to be able to make certain things available to me that most people don't have. And so they would always, they would say, like, you got to go here. And my mother would get on the phone and call. My mother. And she would call, and this is what it is. This is what he needs. And so you really couldn't bullshit her, but I would find a way to manipulate her with that. But the thing was, every single time for 12 of those times, when I was in there, it was always in my head. I always knew, like, when I got out, I was gonna get high. Like, that was part of it. It was just, it's this.
You were just making them happy while also detoxing yourself and taking a tolerance break because you couldn't afford it and you couldn't lie to them anymore.
It honestly, it wasn't even that. It was more of, I think I just didn't want to put in the work, and I was like, all right, like, I'll be open to it. Like, I'll go, and maybe, like, it'll be super easy, and, I'll click a few buttons, and it'll fix me. I won't have to do any of the work. And obviously that doesn't happen, so you get out, and you do what you do. And so that last time...
well, why did you go in that last time? What was that? There's always, like, something that, like, leads up to it.
Yeah, well, my family had gone away, and by then I wasn't going on any trips with them. I couldn't be that far from my supplies by that point. The year prior to that, I had gone to the shore with them, which is like 2 hours away from where we live, and every day I would leave the shore and go pick up more and then come back. So it would be a 4-hour ride. So one day, went to the Cape May Zoo, Googled pictures of monkeys and screenshotted them as proof that we went. Like that level of manipulating. But that last time they had gone on a trip, they were on their way back, and I just, nothing crazy had really even happened. It was just that, I had some Xanax in me, and I had obviously heroin in me, but I was still clear-minded, and I just said, like I can do so much more than this, and something clicked in my brain differently that day. It just was that you're meant to do bigger things than this. You're meant to do more than this. Like, you're a piece of shit. Stop. It is what I felt like in every cell of my body. And so I was like, when they get back, I'm going to tell them I'm going to rehab. And they did. They came back. I told them. I went. They didn't pay for it. I had an inheritance from my grandfather, and so I paid for that. And I took it seriously. When I got out, they made me do part of, like, one of the group sessions was, breaking up with people, really. And so we would role play it. And every time I started, like, I'm never going to be able to do this, but that's fine. Like, let's just role play it out. It's fine, but it's not going to happen. And I left, and I was just like, this isn't going to, I don't know how to do this. This is like my brother at this point, and years, like, lived with me. And I was just, so anyway, so when I got back, I decided that, like, I needed to do the vivitrol shot. And, I had only known very little about it, but I knew that even, Suboxone, since still, an opioid, that you had to be 10 days clean of everything. And when I had gotten out of rehab, that meant I had 7 days at home that I would have to stay completely abstinent before I could get it. And I was just like, this is not going to happen. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do that. I'm still withdrawing, and I was, and terribly. I always withdraw terribly on Suboxone, and so
I see. You were on Suboxone from rehab, and then okay,
I
you
was
were
on
doing
the taper. I had been, I think, 4 or 5 days off of the taper, but I was still so incredibly sick and couldn't sleep, and it was like one of my worst detoxes that I had. And so my family had come to get me, and we had put together this plan that I would never be alone in those 7 days. And so people rearranged work schedules, whatever it was, to make sure that I was never anywhere but myself. And so those 7 days I went and I was able to get the shot. And I'll be honest with you, JD, I would not be here talking to you right now without that shot. There's just no way in hell that I would have been able to stay strong enough to have done it a different way. And I think it's an incredible tool that so many people don't know about or don't have access to. It is covered by welfare insurance. It's covered, but I decided to get that shot, and I did. And the day I got that shot is when I went to go visit that friend. And, I figured, like, can't get high now. There's no risk there. So I went, and I pulled up out front just like I had a trillion times before, went back down into that basement. It's just, the way I remember it now, 6 years later, it was just a dark dungeon, and it essentially was. And I just went down there, and I sat on the couch, and I just remember feeling like you don't belong here anymore. Like I just didn't identify with the person. I was there, 3 weeks before, and I was just like, I can't do this, and I'm not gonna do this. And so, like, I was getting all in my head. I was getting, short of breath. I got up, and I was like, listen, I got to run somewhere, but, I'll be back tomorrow. And I knew, as I said it, that wasn't going to happen. I was never going to come back again. And I got in my car, and I left. And, I cried like a child. And I did for months and months, if not years after that, because that was just it. And so then I said, listen, we can't be in each other's lives. That was that. A year later, I got a text, and it was like, oh, I see you're in this relationship. I'm really happy for you. It was a really nice message. I'm like, well, you can change your life too. And it was just, that's what it was. And then I blocked him. And a few years after that, he reached out to my family and had asked for help with getting into rehab. My parents paid for a lot of things, and they got him into a rehab program. I don't know if he's sober now. It's been my request to, friends and family. I don't want an update. I don't want to hear anything. But I think that that's something that is so important that maybe you guys should do that too, but like the breakup stuff. Because I had been in 12 times before, and no one had ever even addressed that to me. And without that combination of cutting that toxic relationship out and that shot, I truly don't think I would be here right now.
Yeah, I didn't even know that shot existed until like recently. Into sobriety. And I got sober in 2018. That goes to show, but it's only because I think my rehab was more of a 12-step rehab, and it was more like, we're going to get you an AA kind of rehab. So they're not going to promote like the mat. Actually, you know what? I think that's when I heard about it, was like when I was 3 months sober, because somebody was going to get it, and I forgot about it. But yeah, and he still shot up with it.
I mean, the doctor I went to for it is somebody that if you Google him, there's a lot of stuff on there. So he wasn't great, but that's who I could get into the quickest. So I went to him, and then I went to someone else after I think I went for a year and a half. I got the shot every month. But he also prescribed Ritalin as part of this thing. And so I still had to crush and sniff the Ritalin, just because the behaviors are so ingrained. And I just remember thinking, like, Jesus Christ, like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, knock it off. I never, that kind of thing never happened again, but it's just so ingrained in our
No, it really is. So what made you comfortable to get off the shot then after a year and a half?
So it was really important to me that I knew that I could do it without any kind of assistance. And it was really nothing more than that. I mean, I had never really intended on being on it past 3 months, but when I got to 3 months, I was like I never thought I'd be here. Like, what's the big deal? It's a minor discomfort for a second, and then it's done. You're kind of foolish not to take advantage of it if you're a repeat relapser like myself. That was it. I just wanted to know that I could do it without anything else, and so I just made that decision. And I have to be honest with you, I feel incredibly lucky that from the second I got the shot, outside of the initial reaction in my head of like, fuck, I really can't get high at least for 30 days. And you have that panic. And then I realized like I didn't want to. And from that moment, I have never once wanted to use an opiate since. Not since that, I guess that technically makes it September of 2015, but never once have I had the urge or been close to, never. And I've had it around me, people taking medicine, like legit taking medication.
Yeah.
People. And it never triggered anything for me. And I've spoken to some other people who went the vivitrol route as well, in addition, of course, to the programs. And they felt the same way. So I don't know if it has something to do with that, because I know it also curbs alcohol cravings, which is
cravings. Yeah.
So I don't know if that has anything to do with that. It all works on the reward center, I guess.
Yeah, and probably so much of it for so long, it probably just keeps your mind off of it for so long that you create new habits instead to obsess over. Because that addiction that you said as a kid is more of an obsession, like how you obsess with Mariah Carey, and let's be real, like I saw Mean Girls 100 times because you were obsessed with it.
You're welcome. Yeah.
So, it's stuff like that. I'm sure that has something to do with it.
Remember the one time I ran into you at 7-Eleven, definitely before you got sober, because I remember thinking, like, he looks terrible. And, it's not my place. I was just like, wow, you were fucked up. We ran into each other. Remember? I don't know if you remember. You very well may not have.
Pretty high on drugs then, buddy.
Yeah, we were both making coffee. That's what I remember. I just remember being like, oh, it's like, oh, shit, JD. Yeah.
I wonder if I was across the street or...
No, it was something like... yeah.
I was going back to PA. Oh, okay, that makes sense. I would stop at 7-Eleven before I would get back on the 676 to go over... I was living in Lancaster at the time. And, like, 4 times a week, I would drive from where I lived in Mannheim to South Jersey to town to grab and then go back again. So... I was driving back and forth, 2 hours each way, 4 times a week, for like 3 years.
So it's things that come up, and there's things that I think affect you the rest of your life. It's with what you do, of course, it's going to be an everyday topic, and I know it's not, typical for everyone else, but it is. I mean, Alex, my partner, he's clean and sober now, was also an addict. My family makes it a point to bring it up, but in a positive way now. I was always the problem child of the family. Now there's actually good things that they can talk about. So I do always talk about it. I do have my other friends that are in recovery that I can, talk to, because really the thing that I struggle with the most, if I'm being honest, is alcohol, just because of the way our society is, and everything's dependent upon it. So, a business dinner, this and that, and I am so uncomfortable in those situations, and it is so incredibly hard to not drink, you know?
Yeah, it's so funny that I just saw somebody post the other day, like, about ending the stigma of, like, alcohol being acceptable.
Right.
Because, like, it's like, ridiculous that, like, if I was to do a play date, you know what I mean? And I think that's what happened in the post. Like, she was going on a play date with her kid, and she met the other mom, and the other mom offered her a margarita, and she was just like, oh, no, it's okay. But, like, because she didn't want to have to explain. And then all of a sudden, she's the bad person, not the person day drinking what the kids are playing. She's the bad person because she had a problem, and she's just open about it. So she just kept saying, oh, I can't. But it's ridiculous. And it's also hard because you can go into stores and see it all over. You see commercials, everything for alcohol. Like, can you imagine if they did that with pills and you walk into 7-Eleven and there was like a smorgasbord of the different fucking 30s, where the lotto tickets are?
Exactly.
I
think that's the problem, and I think that's what gives people permission. I don't know, far be it from me to make an opinion on that, but I don't know that it's appropriate to have alcohol featured in commercials. I think that, it's well known that it's a toxin, and, humans aren't really supposed to drink it. And then on top of that, I don't know. But yeah, because I thought about the same analogy in my head, and I'm like, imagine like pure heroin, like on your TV screen. I mean,
exactly. But that, but at one point they had commercials for cigarettes too.
Right. But as you look, you do better.
you get information. You get new information, and then you change, and that's okay. Like, it's weird how that works in most things in life. You're allowed to learn. Thank you so much for sitting down talking. I know you're busy with work and shit all the time, but like, we haven't caught up, but still, like, we never talked about like our histories of using together because like we sold, occasionally we'd help, see each other. But like you said, I don't even really remember seeing you that night. Like,
I know.
so, but thank you again, Vince. I appreciate it. It was awesome catching up. So I'll let you get back to work. I'm gonna get back to more work. So, all right.
Thanks, JD. It was so good to see you.
You too. See you there.